Hello and welcome. I have temporarily come out of retirement with another video to share. In this presentation, I will attempt to explain upwards acceleration in the simplest way I can, because it seems so many people do not understand it, nor do they seem to realize there is no other way to explain the effects of gravity using known physics. Before proceeding, I would like to state that all the principles which lead us to the conclusion that Earth must be accelerating upwards can be demonstrated, tested, and verified by all. This isn't theoretical nonsense. It's a conclusion based solely on what is measurable and testable in the real world. Later in this video, there will be a section in which I express my opinions. When I'm expressing opinions, I will display this sign. So there is a clear distinction between what I personally think and what can be tested and measured. Why does it matter if the Earth is accelerating up or not? Well, I have heard this said so many times about flat Earth in general, especially when globe believers hear uncomfortable facts about the globe which they cannot answer. Cognitive dissonance kicks in and they say something like, "Why do you care so much about the shape of the Earth? You still need to get up for work in the morning." Well, the answer to that is simple. If everybody knew the extent that we are all being lied to, then the slave system we reside in would collapse overnight. I see the same scenario when talking about the upwards rising Earth. But instead of normies defending their globe, we have flat earthers who are supposed to be more open-minded doing the same thing. Upwards acceleration goes against their flat Earth indoctrination. Cognitive dissonance kicks in and they don't want to hear it. Well, gravity is the foundation of all the lies. The globe Earth literally depends on gravity. Upwards acceleration can only work on a flat Earth. That's why this subject is so important. Arguably, upwards acceleration is the single biggest globe killer. Yet most flat earthers still scoff and refuse to even try to look at it without bias. Let's start off by looking at the so-called effects of gravity which we experience and can measure here on Earth. 1. Things appear to fall. When we drop an item, it appears to instantly accelerate towards the ground in a straight line at a rate of 9.8 meters per second squared. 2. We have a defined vector. Everything happens in the vertical direction. 3. We have weight. 4. We live in a pressure gradient. The water in the seas increase in pressure the deeper you go, and the gases in the air also have this gradient, with higher pressure at the bottom and lower pressure at the top. 5. We have the phenomenon of buoyancy. When matter is free to displace and move, it will arrange itself in a density gradient with the most dense matter at the bottom and least dense matter at the top. Mainstream academia will tell you that gravity causes all these effects, but gravity has never been proven to exist. It remains just a theory. Gravity has no known mechanism to explain how it works. Gravity cannot be reproduced. In short, gravity is a magical force like a unicorn which can do anything, but nobody knows what it is or how it works. Enter upwards acceleration. Acceleration can explain and reproduce all of these effects perfectly. Not just that, but it is the only way you can reproduce these effects in the real world. There is no other way. Ask yourself why you would disregard the only explanation which can be tested and proven to work in favor of a unicorn or any other nonsense. It appears that when we drop an object, that the object falls downwards to the ground. We have believed this our entire lives, and so it is very difficult for people to accept that it could actually be the ground that is accelerating up to meet the dropped object. To be able to make sense of this counterintuitive concept, it is important that you first understand some basic physics principles and also Newton's laws of motion. We will be talking about force, mass, and acceleration. Force can be described as the push that makes things accelerate or change direction. Mass can be defined as the amount of matter that is in an object. If we compare a cube of lead to the same size cube of aluminium, the lead cube is more dense and has more matter crammed inside it compared to the aluminium cube, which has less matter inside it. The lead has a greater mass, and that is why it is heavier. Acceleration is the rate at which the speed of an object changes over time. Now let us summarize Newton's laws of motion. There are 3 laws of motion. The first is the law of inertia. and it goes like this. An object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion at its same speed and direction, unless acted upon by another force. As an example, if we take this stationary ball, it will remain stationary until a force like this foot kicks it, at which point it will accelerate forward and continue to travel at the same speed and in the same direction, until another force like friction slows it back down. Newton's second law is the law of acceleration. This law says that the acceleration of an object is directly proportional to the net force acting on it, and inversely proportional to its mass. This law is expressed by the formula F equals ma. The force required to accelerate an object is equal to the object's mass multiplied by the rate of acceleration. The definition sounds a bit complicated, but it is actually quite simple. It just means that how fast an object accelerates depends on two things. 1. How much force is applied to it. And 2. The mass of the object being accelerated. The more force you apply, the faster an object will accelerate. And the greater the mass of the object, the harder it is to accelerate that object. This formula will accurately predict the acceleration of any object. Newton's third law is the law of action and reaction. And this law states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If we take this rocket as an example, the action is the thrust exiting the rear of the rocket, and the reaction is the rocket being propelled forward. The two forces are equal and opposite. To conclude the Basic Physics 101 section of this video, it is very important to understand the distinction between constant linear motion and acceleration. Constant linear motion, i.e. something moving at a constant speed in a dead straight line, cannot be measured or detected. If you were traveling at a constant speed on a bullet train, in a perfectly straight line on a perfectly flat and level track, and there were no windows in the train, you would not be able to distinguish if the train was moving or if it was completely stationary. The only way to measure linear constant motion is relative to something else. Hence the term relative motion. For example, if we put windows in that train, then you would know that the train is moving relative to the ground outside the window. True acceleration, i.e. when an object is physically accelerating, is different. True acceleration can be detected and can be measured. If we take a container like a bottle and half fill it with water, we have a basic accelerometer. When we accelerate or decelerate that bottle in any direction, the water will always displace and show the acceleration. Even the slightest increase in velocity will cause some displacement. An accelerometer will accurately measure even the tiniest acceleration. The accelerometer does not lie. Now that we have brushed up on our basic physics, let us get back to the matter in hand, which is, do objects in free fall really accelerate down to the ground? We know for sure that something is accelerating. Either the object is accelerating down to the ground, or the ground is accelerating up to the object. Just like the globe story, we have believed that dropped items fall to the ground all our lives. Everyone accepts gravity as fact, and nobody ever stops to question or even look at what is really happening when an item is dropped. For a moment, try to put your biases and preconceptions to the side and take another look at objects in free fall with fresh eyes. You should see that there are some glaring problems with the idea that those objects are accelerating downwards. If we drop a rock and a feather from a bridge, the rock will appear to fall quickly and the feather will appear to drift down slowly. So many people believe that different items fall at different rates. But this is just because the air resistance affects the feather much more than it affects the rock. In actual fact, without air resistance, absolutely everything, regardless of size, shape, or mass, accelerates to the ground at the exact same rate. Furthermore, absolutely everything that is dropped also starts to accelerate instantaneously. It matters not if you drop a ping pong ball or you dropped a skyscraper. In a vacuum chamber, in the absence of any air, we could suspend a feather, a bowling ball, and a Sherman tank. Then at the precise moment they are released, they will all instantly start to accelerate at the exact same rate. and they will all continue at the same rate until they hit the ground. We know from Newton's second law, and from experience, that it requires different amounts of force to accelerate objects of differing size and mass. If we take this stationary car, for example, you would struggle to accelerate it even a small amount on your own, but it would be easy for you to accelerate a block of polystyrene which is very low mass. If you believe that these items suspended in the vacuum chamber are stationary, just like the stationary car in the previous example, well, what kind of force can instantaneously make them all accelerate like that and all do the exact same thing? Just stop and think about it for a second. It is impossible, it makes no sense at all, and it absolutely violates the laws of motion. Now let us consider the other option, and suppose that it is the ground which is accelerating upwards. In this case, it would work like this. Rather than the dropped objects accelerating, it is the ground which is accelerating upwards at a constant 9.8 meters per second squared. Everything attached to the ground is also constantly accelerating upwards. Now, the moment that the suspended items are released, the force which is accelerating them is removed, and so all the items would instantly stop accelerating and simply continue to travel upwards at a constant velocity, which will be the velocity they were traveling at the moment they were released. Exactly as predicted by Newton's first law of inertia. Then the ground which is constantly accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared will accelerate up to meet them. Very simple, and it all works perfectly without violating any laws. From inside the reference frame, if you were standing at the bottom of the vacuum chamber, the items would appear to fall to the ground as the vast majority of people believe they do. When it is just the ground which is doing the accelerating, everything works exactly as the laws of motion predict. But when you try to say that all those other objects are all magically accelerating downwards at the exact same rate in perfect synchronicity, I'm afraid you are venturing into the land of unicorns. Now let us back this up even further. When we drop the water bottle, the water does not displace. Again, let me clarify that the water bottle will displace under acceleration in absolutely every single instance except for in free fall. So the bottle cannot be accelerating. In free fall, the water behaves as if the bottle was stationary. Stationary, or, more precisely, it behaves as it would do when traveling at a constant velocity. Again, this is exactly what the laws of motion predict if the ground is accelerating upwards and the bottle is released. Now, let us throw the bottle away, and instead use an accelerometer. While the accelerometer is suspended at the top of the vacuum chamber, it reads an acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared, or 1g. The exact moment the accelerometer is released, it instantly reads 0 acceleration. And once it hits the ground, it reads 1g again. The accelerometer does not lie. It is not accelerating downwards in free fall. It is just moving upwards at a constant velocity and registering 0 acceleration. Despite what your eyes tell you they see, items in free fall are not accelerating down to the ground. The ground is accelerating up to meet them. What causes the vector? Why is our reality oriented in this vertical direction? Well, upwards acceleration is what creates the vector. The prerequisite for a direction is motion. You need motion to have a direction. It really is that simple. Stationary doesn't have and cannot have a direction. Period. Why do we have weight? Weight is simply the resistance to being accelerated. Newton's second law. The law of acceleration describes how much force is required to accelerate you upwards. F equals ma. So the force required to accelerate you is your mass, multiplied by 9.8 meters per second squared. Then Newton's third law states that, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is your resistance to that acceleration, and it is equal to the acceleration. Your weight is simply the resistance to being accelerated upwards. When you accelerate in a car, you get pushed back into your seat. We all know this, and we have all experienced it. Well, the ground is accelerating up and pushing into your feet, and so you feel like you are being pressed into the ground, in the exact same way as you are pushed back in the accelerating car. You can test this for yourself in an elevator. When the elevator accelerates and thus adds to the Earth's acceleration, your weight increases. When the elevator decelerates, your weight temporarily decreases. And when the elevator rises at a constant speed, the only acceleration is that of the ground rising, and your weight remains exactly the same as when you are standing on the ground. Jump off a cliff so that you are no longer being accelerated by the ground and your weight will disappear. Testable, repeatable, demonstrable. Acceleration is the cause of weight. Period. Pressure gradients. This is a good one and should surely open a few eyes. Let's look at gas pressure. We all know that gas particles are free to move in all directions. The very nature of gas pressure is that it seeks to equalize. If we take a container of pressurized gas, when we accelerate that container, the gas particles get pushed against the inner wall of the container in the same way we get pushed back into the seat of the accelerating car. Then that pressure disperses as you move further from the wall. The acceleration forces the gas into a pressure gradient. A constant rate of acceleration will create and maintain a constant gas pressure gradient. However, the moment we stop accelerating the container, the gas will seek to equalize again, and the gradient will instantly disappear. It is a similar principle with water. Look at this container of water. For every 10 meters of water, the pressure increases 1 bar, or 14.5 psi. Just like the gas pressure, the pressure is highest against the side of the container, then decreases the further away from the side you go. Let's draw a line separating each 10-meter depth. You'll see that the bottom section is having to push up and support 40 vertical meters of water, and the pressure is 4 bar. The next section of water is having to push up and support 30 vertical meters of water above it, and the pressure is 3 bar, and so on back up to the top of the water where there is no pressure. If we take this cylinder of water with 3 holes in it, we can see how the pressure gradient increases towards the bottom. If we drop the container so that it is no longer being accelerated by the ground, then the pressure gradient completely and instantly disappears. Not even one drip will come out the holes. This is because constant upwards acceleration is what creates the pressure gradients. This is testable, repeatable, demonstrable. Acceleration is the cause of pressure gradients. There is no other way you can recreate this. Period. Buoyancy. Why do we have the phenomenon of buoyancy? Well, contrary to what many flat earthers have been led to believe, buoyancy does not explain gravity, and the buoyant effects are not self-causing. They do not just happen by themselves. Nothing can accelerate by itself. There is always a force acting on it. The buoyant effects are caused by the upwards acceleration of the ground beneath us pushing up. We know from the law of acceleration that the more dense something is, the more it will resist being accelerated. If we were to stack up some solid objects with less dense at the bottom and more dense at the top, assuming the lower density object at the bottom is strong enough to support the more dense object without collapsing, then they will simply stay in place. But liquids and gases are different because they are free to move and displace. If we take 2 liquids of different densities, which do not mix, like vegetable oil and water, the water is denser, and therefore it resists being accelerated more than the oil does. Everything is always moving upwards, but consider it like the water wants to lag behind more than the oil does as the earth accelerates up. Unlike the solid objects in the previous example, the liquids are free to move around each other. So, the oil, which is less dense and therefore easier to accelerate, is able to move around the water until they are stacked in order of their densities, at which point their positions will stay fixed and they will continue to be accelerated up just like the stack of solid items. This explains how we get an image like this, where we have all these different liquids stacked up in order of their densities. They will all displace each other until they settle in their correct order. This is what is happening when we see a bubble rising up through water, or a helium balloon rising up through air. It is the same principle of the more dense liquid or gas lagging behind the less dense liquid or gas. There are 3 factors which govern how different liquids or gases will displace. 1 is the rate of the acceleration. This is the cause and can be manipulated in an elevator. The greater the rate of acceleration, the greater the buoyant effects will be. 2 is the difference between the density of the object and the density of that which surrounds it, i.e. their relative densities. The greater the difference between the two, the greater the buoyant effects will be. 3. The viscosity of the surrounding liquid or gas. Let us use a bubble of air rising through water as an example. The water has a certain viscosity or thickness, so the water can only part so fast to allow the air bubble through. This creates a terminal velocity for the bubble, meaning it can only rise as fast as the water can part to allow it through. Obviously, unless you increase the rate of acceleration, which is the force driving the motion, in which case it will move faster. The thicker or more viscous the liquid, the slower the bubble will rise. To demonstrate the buoyant effects horizontally, courtesy of William, here we have the accelerating van. In reality, everything inside the van is moving forwards, in the same way that everything on Earth is always moving upwards. As the van accelerates, the denser apple which resists the acceleration the most lags behind and appears to move to the back of the van. And the helium balloon, which is less dense than the surrounding air, is displaced to the front of the van. It is the acceleration which makes it happen. Whilst we are on the subject of liquids displacing and being free to move around, it is probably a good time to add this into the video. A statement or proof we constantly hear from flat earthers is that water seeks to find its own level. This is a part truth. You see, water doesn't have any particular form of its own. Neither can it move by itself. In order for water to find its own level, it requires two things. 1 is containment. 2 is acceleration. Just as we have covered in the buoyancy explanation, the ground is accelerating upwards, and the water is trying to resist being accelerated. This means that the water will seek to displace and follow the path which accelerates it the least until it has completely leveled out, and it is then accelerated upwards. This is how you can know for certain that resting water is truly level and doesn't just look level. And also how you know the Earth is accelerating upwards, because without the acceleration, there is no inertial resistance and the water cannot and will not displace. The scientific method. The scientific method is a systematic process used to acquire knowledge through observation, experimentation, and analysis. There are two variables in the scientific method. One is the independent variable. This is the presumed cause, which you need to be able to manipulate. 2 is the dependent variable. This is what is being observed and what we are trying to find the cause of. The basic steps of the scientific method are as follows. 1. Ask a question. This could be, what causes the water pressure? 2. Make observations. Water comes out the hole in the tube at such a rate. 3. Form a hypothesis. Which is your educated guess? I.e., I think upwards acceleration is the cause of the water pressure. 4. Create a test to manipulate the independent variable. I.e., take your tube of water with the hole and place it in an elevator, increase and decrease the rate of upwards acceleration. 5. See what happens. Oh, the water comes out faster when we increase the acceleration and comes out slower when we decrease the rate of acceleration. 6. Draw your conclusions as to the cause. Increasing the rate of acceleration increases the water pressure, and decreasing the rate of acceleration decreases the water pressure. There is a direct relationship between the two. Acceleration must be the cause. In conclusion, by manipulating the rate of upwards acceleration, you can manipulate all the supposed effects of gravity. Then in free fall, with the upwards acceleration completely removed, all the effects of gravity like weight, water pressure, and buoyancy completely and instantly disappear. How much more proof do you need that the cause of the effects of gravity is upwards acceleration? Upwards acceleration is the only way to explain and recreate the effects of gravity, and it all works perfectly. There is no other way. Every example I have covered can be demonstrated, tested, and verified by all. Unless you can go outside the reference frame, upwards acceleration cannot be disproven to be the cause of the effects of gravity. Upwards acceleration should be the default position for everyone, because it is the only explanation which works without the need for magic unicorns. What are the common responses to this theory? Probably the most common negative response I hear about upwards acceleration is the speed Earth would need to be traveling at if it were accelerating upwards at a constant 9.8 meters per second squared. Now, you don't need a university degree in maths to realize that a constantly accelerating Earth would be reaching mind-bending speeds in just a relatively short amount of time. Other common responses are, what is pushing the Earth upwards? And what is the Earth traveling through? I think these are pointless questions because they are unanswerable questions. You see, nobody knows anything about what exists outside our reference frame. Earth could be traveling up through God's imagination for all we know. The speed could be infinite, or maybe everything could reset every 24 hours. Nobody can know the unknown. Everything outside the reference frame is a complete mystery, and I feel it pointless to speculate about that too much. For the moment, let's look at this from a different perspective. I think it is safe to say that the majority of people watching this video will already believe that we live on a flat Earth or level plane. Well, where is that level plane? Does the plane extend forever? Or does it end? If it ends, then what is out here to the side of it? What is holding it up? What is up here above it? And what is down here below it? You don't know? Nobody knows. And yet you are still satisfied that the Earth is level. Why? Because you can measure it to be level. The same applies to upwards acceleration. It's the exact same thing. We don't know anything at all about what exists outside the reference frame, but we know that everything we can measure from here inside the reference frame is showing us that Earth is accelerating upwards at a constant 9.8 meters per second squared. It's just as measurable as the level plane, if not more so. Agents and centrifugal force. I have been fascinated by the subject of flat Earth for over a decade. Over that time, I have come to realize just how much of what we have been told about the world is a lie. If you control the information, then you control what people think. What people think and believe creates their reality. It's that simple. Control the information and you can create reality. Where do we get our information from? Books, school, television, social media, the internet. It makes perfect sense that all these routes to information would be totally controlled. Arguably, that is why we have these sources in the first place. Just like the news, they are not there to keep you informed or educated. They are there to tell you what to think. The internet is just another control tool. Google, YouTube, etc. These are all totally controlled. They appear to be free, but really what the majority get to see is what they are fed. Furthermore, just like politics, you are generally offered two opposing sides, and both sides are controlled by the same source. If you speak against the system, nobody will ever hear you. And conversely, if you are hearing it, then you were supposed to hear it. Everything by design. I believe that the subject of flat Earth is no different. On one side, we have the globe story. This is the main story that the controllers want you to believe. And for those who have figured out the globe is bogus, there is the flat Earth pizza alternative to create the false dichotomy between the two options. I think that for the most part, flat Earth is a psyop introduced specifically for this purpose. Yes, it is true that we do not live on a scientifically impossible ball. It is also true that resting water is indeed level. Nor has anybody ever been to the fictional place they call outer space. But much of what flat Earth is believed beyond that has been fed to them by agents. What do I mean by agents? Agents are people placed there to control and contain the direction of the narrative. I have come to realize that all the main flat Earth channels are just that. They are agents placed there to misdirect. If a flat Earth channel has a lot of subscribers and is allowed a bigger audience, then it is supposed to be that way, and these channels are controlled. Who do I trust? I trust myself and a small handful of others who have proved their worth. That's it. In this sea of lies, you need to think for yourself and be wary. You need to think critically about everything you hear. The truth defends itself and doesn't need a sales pitch. For a long time, Big Del and then his American clone without the accent William have been trying to control the upward rising Earth narrative with their constant motion claims. Their claims are misdirection, and I am personally quite certain they are agents. Dell would go live weekly, ranting for hours to sell his script. Many people, including myself, were suckered in and bought into this bullshit, but over time people have worked it out for themselves and seen through the deception. Dell's lies and integrity have been called out. After having been so adamant about his constant motion claims, he has been proven wrong and spanked to the point he has nowhere left to go. He has backed himself in a corner with nothing left he can say. As a result, for the last 6 months or so, he has practically disappeared. Because he can't go live, he has nothing to say other than to admit being wrong, which obviously he is not allowed to do. Right now, Dell and whoever controls him are treading water, trying desperately not to drown. They need to keep his character relevant, but there is nothing left for him to come back with. The best he can do now is sporadically come online ranting about some irrelevant nonsense. If he were to come online more frequently than that, it would be obvious to even his most gullible fans that he has nothing to say. Dell, William, and whoever handles them have been forced to concede that acceleration is required, because it blatantly is required. Constant motion does nothing, as I've covered in length with the laws of motion. Let's hear William say constant motion.
And it's just in constant motion pressing up against us.
Sorry, William. Was that constant motion? Or constant bullshit? I couldn't quite hear you. Now let's hear William do a U-turn and say acceleration.
Well, in my opinion, it is accelerating. It is accelerating. It is accelerating.
Now wait for it. There is more. Please, William, enlighten us with more of your profound pearls of wisdom.
Here's the thing where most people don't understand. There is 2 types of acceleration.
All jokes aside, what William is clumsily trying to say here is that rather than upwards linear acceleration, centrifugal force could be the cause of gravity. This is absolutely their last-ditch attempt to salvage the situation and to try and persuade people that the acceleration could come from the constant motion of some kind of centrifuge. Before I end this presentation, I will quickly dispense with this centrifugal nonsense and explain why this cannot be. And then Dell is done in my eyes. He is either not smart enough to be on a soapbox trying to educate others, or he's an agent. In either case, he should no longer be allowed in the conversation or be afforded any credibility whatsoever. Centrifugal force. For those who don't know what a centrifuge is, or who don't know what centrifugal force is, a centrifuge is basically like a playground roundabout, or a bucket swung around on a rope. There is a central point or a tether point, and everything revolves around that point like a compass drawing a circle. It requires a force to make the centrifuge spin and a constant acceleration to maintain the circular path. This spinning motion creates a centrifugal force which flings matter outwards away from the center. Centrifugal force is actually an effect. The real force is that which pushes the centrifuge around. There are 2 factors which control how much centrifugal force is generated. One is RPM, and the other is the radius of the circular path. RPM, revolutions per minute, is a measurement of how fast the centrifuge is spinning. The higher the RPM, the greater the centrifugal force will be. The radius of the circle is the distance from the center to the outside of the circle. If the centrifuge is spinning at a set RPM, the centrifugal force increases when you increase the radius. Again, just like when Dell originally spoke about Earth rising at a constant velocity, centrifugal force could seem like a plausible way to explain gravity if you don't look too closely. But unfortunately for Dell and William, it is easy to conclusively prove that this is impossible. Here are 3 quick reasons why centrifuge cannot work. 1. If we live on a level plane, the radius of the spinning circle will increase the further you travel out from the center of that plane. As you see here at the center, we have a certain radius, and as we move out here to the sides of the Earth, the radius increases. This would mean that the centrifugal force would be greater at the sides than at the center. This increase of centrifugal force would push more water out to the sides, and thus forcing the oceans to also follow that curved radius. I wonder if Dell and William think we live on a concave Earth now. 2. If we were living in a centrifuge, then the force which is pushing the Earth would be sideways and Earth's true motion would be sideways rather than upwards. This poses so many problems that it is laughable that it is even being suggested. Just as an example, in reality here on Earth it is possible to fire a cannonball directly upwards and it will come back down to the same spot it was fired from. This confirms the acceleration is linear and upwards. Obviously, this cannot happen if you are spinning around sideways in a centrifuge because the Earth would have moved around the circular path by the time the cannonball returned. Also, once the cannonball is detached from the circular path, what is generating the centrifugal force to make it return? Are we to suppose that the atmosphere is attached with Velcro to the spinning Earth like in the globe Earth story? I don't think so. 3. If the centrifugal force was truly flinging items in free fall downwards away from the center, then those items in free fall would be experiencing true acceleration, and that true acceleration would be detectable by both the water bottle and the accelerometer. We have already more than covered the fact that items in free fall are traveling at a constant velocity and are not accelerating at all. There are a multitude of reasons why a centrifugal system absolutely cannot work. It is shocking that this is even being considered, and it just shows how desperate these agents have become. The acceleration is constant and linear, and it is straight upwards. Bye-bye Dell, and bye-bye William. It is game over for you guys. Centrifugal force is as stupid as your constant motion claims. You've exhausted every little trick you can possibly try, and it's good riddance to the pair of you. I have no time for lies and cheats. It has taken me around a month to put this video together. I have very few subscribers and not many people will even see it. I know I am not going to change the world. For me, this is more of a social experiment to see how the people who do watch this video will react. The cognitive dissonance seems to be stronger with this subject than any other I have encountered. If you are adamant that upwards acceleration is wrong, but you can't explain why, then this is a good indication that you are under a spell. Thanks for watching. I hope you all were able to make sense of the concepts covered in this video, and even if you have not been converted, I truly hope that you will at least be prepared to contemplate what has been said, and take a closer look with an open mind. Take care everyone and goodbye.